Hi, I'm Keith with Field Dynamics, and in this video we're going to talk about chakras. Chakras are really popular, and they're also really significant in our energy system. So over the course of this video we're going to cover a bunch of different topics, from what the chakras are in structure, how they're functioning in the system, how to unblock chakras, what we mean when we say that chakras are the different dimensions in our multidimensional system, how geometry is in relation to chakras, a little bit of mysticism and mythology. So basically, a number of things are going to be covered around chakras, and hopefully it's useful to you. Now, this is part of a video in a series about the energy field anatomy, and so far we've covered the torus and the kundalini system, and now we're up to the chakras. And I'm trying to emphasize that these structures in our energy field are part of a developmental process. So whereas the torus is the unity structure and the kundalini is the polarity, the chakras is where we find ourselves in multiplicity and in multidimensionality. So a really good way to understand this is by getting that the chakras are an analog to music. So if we see that there are 7 primary chakras, and that in music there are 7 notes in the primary scale, we see how this organizational pattern is being reflected. And indeed, the chakras can be understood as a musical kind of system. It's kind of a consciousness expressive system that has different notes, different accents, and different levels. And we'll clear that up along the way in this video. But if you think about how a saxophone works, you have a bunch of different notes going down the center of a tube, and there's a saxophonist who's blowing into the top, and then it's coming out the bottom and creating a pitch. Now you could say that that musician is pushing energy or flow down through the tube, and depending on which valves are open or closed, you get different pitches, different melodies, different sequences. Now that's really a lot like how our chakra system is working, except it's not working with music, it's working with the psyche, with mind. And that is what the chakras are known as. The normal translation is that they are the psychic centers, and that is the equivalent of psychology, of mind. The psyche, even in many ways, is a translation from the word soul. But nonetheless, we'll go over a bunch of different components in the chakra system in this video to come. If you remember, the kundalini system is the vertical channel. At least that's the prime structure in the kundalini, up and down. Now the chakras take a 90-degree angle, and they have to do with the horizontality of the body from front to back. So the regular iconography of the chakras shows that there are these kind of little spinning energetic funnels or cones, and that is what it looks like on a particular level of extrasensory perception. But think of each of these cones as having a rotation, both in and out. And so it's feeding energy, it's feeding information back and forth into that central channel, and then that central channel becomes the conduit that brings the information in total in and out of one's own local energy field. So the chakras have this horizontal aspect emanating from the center of the spine, the center of the central channel, and they have a correlation to our endocrine system. So everything in the energy anatomy has a correlation in the physical body, and in the chakras case, it's the endocrine system. So with the endocrine system, we understand that they are hormonal regulators. So the chakra system is psychic regulation, mind regulation. And in that way, you can't exactly go in and tweak the chakras. They're, in a sense, somewhat of an involuntary system, like the endocrine system is. But your own conscious awareness and the way that you make decisions and the way that you interact with the world can reshape, re-regulate the chakras so that they're functioning with more flow, with more harmony, and with more balance. I mentioned that the chakras follow an organizational pattern analogous to our musical system, but we can also find it in a lot of places in our world. Another common thing to see in terms of this movement into the organization of 7 is white light refracting into the 7 colors of the rainbow. So everybody is familiar with this, but at the same time, we actually have the same kind of organizational patterns in our society. So we have 7 days in the week. And if we look even more deeply, we see that in our religious traditions and our mythology, we also have the 7 days in the Genesis story, the 7 heavens, But if you go to Asia, you'll see that a lot of the pagodas and temples actually have 7 levels on top of the temples, or there are, in a lot of the Buddhist iconography, there is the crown of the Buddha, and there are 7 levels in some kind of ornamental hat or cap or pine cone type shape. Each of the chakras is a level of mind, or an aspect of mind, a refraction from that white light into a color. And indeed, they do have these specific colors when seen with extrasensory perception. So you'll regularly hear about the characteristics of the chakras in something like chakra psychology, and I'll briefly go over all of them with you now. The root chakra has to do with survival, or very base consciousness. You could think of it as elemental consciousness. And the second has to do with our relationship to others and groups. And of course, there's a strong sexual aspect to it. The third chakra is our relationship to ourself as a personality, as an individuated self. And our fourth chakra is our heart. It's our connection into universal love. The fifth chakra in the throat has to do with free communication and expressing oneself in a higher creative capacity. And what this is it's the positive polarity, or the upper polarity, to the second chakra, in that is an expressive or creative aspect in the lower half of the body, and then the throat is a creative aspect in the upper half. And then the sixth chakra is about identity again, just like in the third, but instead of individuated identity at the level of the personality, it's a universal identity at the level of the self, the capital self. So if you say, I am, then that is the same I am that everyone else says. When we move up into the seventh chakra, we move to connection to spirit, connection to oneness, and in a sense, the movement away from any sense of self into a pure merger into unity. Chakras are part of our multidimensional system. So let's get into multidimensionality and how we can understand chakras in that context. So the key to a multidimensional system is geometry. And let's connect the dots between a few different findings, a few different things that you're probably familiar with. So on the one hand, there is the traditional yogic iconography, where you see a picture of a yogi and there are a bunch of centers, geometric forms going down the midline of the body. And so the Kundalini channel is running up and down that vertical, and where the Kundalini channels cross, the Ida and the Pingala, you get a chakra. But we have a similar finding in the amplitahedron. Now this is a discovery at the Large Hadron Collider in 2013. And what was found is that looking deeply into the very fabric of time and space, that underneath time and space, or what is beyond or outside of time and space, is a form of geometry in which time and space is emerging from. So this is a piece of cutting-edge scientific research that shows the importance of geometry to time and space, which is dependent on electromagnetism. And so we know that the chakras have to do with our energy field, our light field, our electromagnetic field, and we're finding that time and space, which electromagnetism is dependent on, electromagnetism is a phenomena that's intertwined with the idea of time and space. So basically, geometry underlies this phenomena. So it's not surprising to find now that these yogis were seeing that geometry seems to be in the center of each of these fields of light, each of these information fields. Now, the geometric aspect is really interesting because geometry is actually a form that represents frequency. And an easy way to understand this is to watch some videos on cymatics. And simply, cymatics shows us how if you put frequency through a vibrational medium, like a plate with sand on it, particular frequencies will produce certain geometric forms automatically in the sand. So what that's showing us is that there's an information conversion available between geometry and frequency. And the idea of converting information from one form to another is exactly how our body is working all the time. There are light waves, and there's air pressure, and we see and we hear based on information coming into the nervous system through electrical impulses, and then the brain is computing a bunch of data, and it gives us a sensory experience through the physical body. But what's happening with the chakras and with the energy field is that it seems that extrasensory perception at the level of the energy field is potentially functioning a little bit outside of the limitations of chemicals and atoms like in our physical body, but having something more to do with electromagnetic fields and light and geometry. And it's a very rich subject, and you can see that some of these different fields of information are contributing to a broader picture that combines the wisdom traditions with a modern scientific understanding. So we're establishing that a chakra and geometry are intimately related, and the center of each chakra is a geometric form, and that geometric form is creating a frequency band, and that is also a dimension. Now, it's not the dimension of length, width, and height, but is a dimension in consciousness. And the way that all the chakras are relating to one another is that they're strung along that central channel. And how might it be that they are linking in and connecting to one another? Well, if we look at Buckminster Fuller's jitterbug, what we see is that you can take geometry, complex geometry, and what can be nested inside of it are simpler forms. So basically you start with something like an icosahedron, and you can take that complex geometric form and you can fold it and rotate it, and it goes into a simpler form of geometry. And then you can fold it and rotate it, and then it goes into yet a simpler form of geometry. And so we would say these are nested geometric forms. And the key to it is the rotation. So the rotation moves you down that center line from one spot, one nodal point, to the next. Now, it's in this phenomena of rotation where we move into understanding what it means for a chakra to be blocked. So the chakra is spinning, and that spin helps your overall energy field to be rotating. And each of the chakras contributes a particular bandwidth in the overall field, and the torus holds that overall frequency band. But each chakra holds a particular subset of frequencies. And if a chakra is blocked at all, if its center is unhinged, or if there's some kind of obstruction, what happens is it doesn't rotate fully, and so it doesn't express the full frequency. And that means that one's consciousness or one's perception at that level is a bit obstructed. So unblocking chakras means getting the chakras to spin and then to become harmonious and balanced amongst themselves so that the overall field can spin more and more, and then your perception gets more and more broad and more clear. Okay, here are 3 tips to help unblock your chakras. So the chakras are perceptual filters. They are levels of consciousness, levels of mind, and when they're clouded, it clouds our perception from that level. So we interpret our experience through the clarity of our chakras. So the first tip is analyze where you're coming from and why you're coming from somewhere. When you have an experience and you feel a particular way, try and understand why it is that you feel that way, and then analyze what it is that you're going to do in response to that and why it is that you're going to choose to respond that way. You see, if you can start to become an analyzer of the very filters that the chakras are from a higher level of observation, then you can start to see where it is that you're coming from. So this is a really important part of unblocking the chakras, because it's the insight, it's the clarity of our mindfulness, our awareness of what it is and why we're doing it, that actually re-regulates them in many ways. So tip number 2 is develop observational capacity. And in essence, that means develop the meditative mind. You see, if you don't develop more capacity to observe yourself, then you're not going to be able to become more clear as to why it is what you're doing and where are you coming from in response to something. So number 2 is to develop observational capacity. And the traditional way to do that is through meditation, but there are many, many ways to become more aware of what it is that you're doing, like simple mindfulness practice or journaling or whatever it is that works for you. The third tip is to pick up a subtle energy practice. Now, the chakras exist at the level of the electromagnetic field, and so if you want to get more spin, more torsion in there, and potentially clear some blockage to make it easier to observe and easier to make different choices, then a subtle energy practice can be of great benefit. So energy healing is one thing, and field dynamics is a modality that I've created that, of course, is quite suitable for that. But there are a lot of energy healing modalities, and there are a lot of subtle energy healing practices, such as crystal healing. So whatever resonates with you, it can be really worthwhile to pick up a subtle energy practice, and that will definitely move your energy field development along, and it will certainly help to unblock and get the chakras to be moving more fluidly. Thank you so much for watching. This video on chakras has covered a lot of ground, and hopefully this is useful information to you. Please check out the Field Dynamics page and subscribe to this one. We'd love to get your feedback. We're trying to do a good job of putting out high quality content, and we'd like nothing more than to contribute to your inner practice and your process of self-transformation.